How does one describe the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe? Better question is, how does one describe the Stanley Parable? It's an adventure game, kind of. It's about a guy who works in an office, and all he does is push buttons. But everybody in the office disappears one day. Except for Stanley, and except for... there is another guy. And the entire time, there's like a British narrator who tells you what to do, and you can tell him no. He says not to do something that isn't what he said to do, and then the game changes. Look, I have no idea how to even begin describing this game. And as a result, this video is a huge mountain of spoiler. There's a new one. There's Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. And it's for consoles, it's for PlayStation, and Xbox, and Switch, but it's also on PC. It's running in Unity, not the source engine, which is fantastic, because it sure looks like the source engine. Visually, nothing's changed about the game. For the most part, there's a couple tiny details that are slightly different, but everything's kind of how you remember it from 2013. When you first start the game, it asks if you've played the game before, it asks you to adjust the brightness, it asks you to set the time. None of that is relevant. In fact, the brightness setting actually doesn't do anything. The game is one brightness forever. And you play through the original game, not much has changed. One of the game's endings is about video games. That one's got some different games in it. One of the endings is called Real Person, and the images in that are different, and some of the effects. But for the most part, everything is new, and there is a door that opens up that's called New Content, where you get to see the new content in Ultra Deluxe. And it's just a circle you can jump in. And the narrator goes on this tirade about how the Stanley Parable used to be great. He reads reviews from the likes of James Stephanie Sterling, and I think there's an IGN one in there. I don't remember who wrote that one. And he laments that the game used to be great, and now it's been reduced to nothing, to garbage. Because the new content is just a jump circle, but you had to pay money for that. Game is, I think, $25 or $16 if you've already owned the original. So the narrator comes up with stuff to add to the game to make it a better value, which ultimately culminates in him making the Stanley Parable 2, which is a game within the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe that you can play. He adds things like new office decor. You get to pick the balloons. He puts up balloons. You get a bucket. The bucket is important. There is a very big hole. There's an achievement you can't get, and there's collectible figurines. And then from then on, you are playing the Stanley Parable 2, which has all of these new features. It is the same game, just with those features added. The bucket... You pick up the bucket, okay? And the dialogue changes. When you get to... There's a room with two doors, and normally it's like, when Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left. But now it's like, when Stanley and the bucket came to a set of two open doors, they entered the door on their left. Like, that's it. The endings are different. The bucket changes the endings. And all of the new bucket endings are a lot of fun. With the exception of video games and the one where you fall down the stairs, you can't do those. Also, the confusion ending is kind of a bust as well. But now you have twice as much game. Kind of. Sort of. And then you can also go on the hunt for all of the little figurines. If you collect all of the figurines, you then play a new level where you look back on all of the figurines that you got. And the narrator made a video for one of them in the style of a Windows Movie Maker, like 2006 video, which is just hats off to him. I sincerely love that. It made me quite happy to see. But then, you close the game, you reopen the game, and it asks you to set the time again. And because you don't just leave it at midnight, the game's like, next time you load it up, just tell me your favorite time of day. So then it does that the third time you open up the game, and then they add a bunch of different like sliders and things you can adjust. It becomes like, slide this slider until the puppy and the kitty are friends. And then you unlock the epilogue. And the epilogue is really kind of the crux of this game. It's a commentary on nostalgia. The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe asks us to think about the passage of time. It's been 9 years since the Stanley Parable came out. There are no doubt like middle school kids who are now in college getting to experience the Stanley Parable for themselves. I was 16 when that game came out, and I'm almost 25 now. So there's a lot of moments where, like, so much of the new content is about the fact that we kind of put on rose-tinted glasses, although in my case they are blue. You know what? I'll put them back on. These glasses are great, but they make me want to hate hedgehogs, and I don't know why. This looks awful. This looks stupid. The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe asks us to consider the passage of time. Everything seems better in the past. We kind of make up this fake halcyon of better days that simply did not exist. And to some respect, we have to ask, like, what are we doing with our lives? So much of the new content is spurred by the narrator of the Stanley Parable finding a negative Steam review and wanting to appease the person who wrote it, this character by the name of Cookie9, who I don't think is a real person on Steam. But, you know, I could be wrong. So the narrator adds all of this stuff to try to appease Cookie9, who didn't like the first game. And in the epilogue, you learn that they didn't even like the sequel. We're kind of... We feel compelled as creators to make something that everybody can like. And when somebody says, oh, you know, this can be changed, we sometimes have to step in and go, no, I don't think it needs to be changed. I just don't think you'll like this. Because the narrator adds a skip button, as per Cookie9's suggestion. But it ends up skipping too much, and you end up in this, like Planet of the Apes post-apocalypse where the whole game's been destroyed. And through it all, like, Cookie9 still doesn't like the game. You know, some people are just going to sit there and complain for their whole life, and, you know, it's not your job to appease them. It's your job to be able to say, as a creator, it's just not for you. And that's kind of what Ultra Deluxe is about. Which is weird to say, because this is also a game where you can fall down a very big hole. You know, this is a game where one of the endings is you climb into a vent and you learn that the narrator is a tape recording, and when you hit stop, he's like, I'm not a tape recording. And that's it. The game smash cuts back to the loading screen. It's a very interesting game, and there's a lot of very interesting stuff around it. Yeah, you can play the entire game's content in about 5 hours. If you haven't played the Stanley Parable before, you could probably do it in about 8 or 9. But it's not a very long game, is I think really the important thing to know. It's got a lot of endings, and it's got a lot of different variations. It plays a lot with physical space. The original Confusion ending is very good at that. You will take like 6 or 7 left turns and end up somewhere different. It might take longer if you're not used to the kind of game that Stanley Parable is. If you haven't played the original, or even the mod version, then this will be kind of a new experience, and it'll probably take you a couple hours to see everything. But I was, as a player who had beaten the original 100%, except for 2 of the achievements. I should stress one of the game's achievements was don't play the Stanley Parable for 5 years. Ultra Deluxe has an achievement for not playing it for 10. You know what? The more I'm looking in the mirror, the more I actually like these. I think this is just the look now. Maybe I should grow out a mustache. How many Robotnik jokes have I done? 2? That's like 3 too many. If you like games that are kind of a commentary on games, where you just like when a game is like, look at this weird thing, you will love the Stanley Parable. And to that respect, Ultra Deluxe is a fantastic starting point. If you've never played a Stanley Parable before, it will walk you through a few of the endings before you can play the new content. If you haven't played Stanley Parable before, just click no and you'll have to play a few more endings before the new content door opens. The new content's kind of beginner's guide-ish. It is definitely just Davey Wreden kind of talking about his experiences with game design, but through the lens of Stanley and the narrator. If you have played the Stanley Parable before, it's fine. You're not really missing out on much. Some of the bucket endings are less inventive than others. Some of them are just, oh, the bucket's here now. But some of them do radically change things. I would say at the very least, it is worth playing. I would see if you can't find somebody who has a copy of the game that you can just, like, play off of them for a little bit. Because I think it's really one of those games that you have to kind of experience for yourself before you'll know if you like it. As somebody who likes weird meta-commentary stuff, I immediately loved the Stanley Parable. I loved the mod. I was following the composer on YouTube, and when he announced that he was composing for the Stanley Parable back in 2012 or 2013, I was elated. I loved that game. And Ultra Deluxe is a pretty worthy successory, sequel, remake, revamp, refresh thing. I think ultimately the final verdict is you'll know if you like it or not. There's a demo for the original version on Steam. I would definitely recommend playing that because it kind of gives you an idea as to what like the kind of comedy and writing style and gameplay of the Stanley Parable is like. It has nothing to actually do with the Stanley Parable. It's not like a snippet of the game. It's kind of its own bespoke thing written in the style of the Stanley Parable. I would highly recommend playing that demo for yourself to know if you would like the Stanley Parable or not. I'm so glad that this is an unscripted video. I started writing a script the other night and I'm like, this is impossible. It just kind of needs to be a ramble. So what do you think? Do I... Glasses on? Glasses off? What do we want? Do we like these? Do we not? I think they're fun. Makes me want to build a wacky machine.